Hey, what's up? Today we have a rabbi, I think that's the first time on this channel, to tell us where atheists get it wrong.
Let's reach some understanding here. We're going to be talking about the beliefs of religion and the attitudes of science.
Alright, I'm already concerned. Look, I understand there are a lot of atheists out there, like on YouTube, like myself, who appreciate science, who lean, generally speaking, towards scientific explanations of physical phenomena. But if right off the bat you say that this is about religion versus science, shouldn't you have called this something more like, I don't know, where science acceptors get it wrong or something like that? I mean, it's certainly not as if every atheist is really into science. A prime example from my channel being Paris Tosin, the timeline science guy, which, don't let the name fool you, has absolutely nothing scientific about it. And on the other hand, there are a lot of very good and influential scientists who are religious. I don't know, it just bothers me how often I see from religious people, or even atheists, frankly, this conflation of atheism with science. Yeah, there's a significant overlap, sure, but that doesn't mean they're at all the same thing.
They're very different disciplines, but they're both trying to accomplish the same thing. They're both trying to figure out what's true and what's real.
I would consider that overly generous to religion. Science, yes, is trying to figure out what's true and what's real. Bit by bit, piece by piece, constantly changing and learning from what's true and what's real, from observing what's actually there. Religion, on the other hand, seems largely just to say what's true and what's real. There's not a whole lot of figuring going on. I mean, sure, you get different sects arguing with each other, going, no, my version's true because... And that's usually followed by some quote from some holy book, or some theologian, or some story. Point being, in my experience, when religious people argue about religion, most often, they're not trying to test their ideas and test their arguments and test their evidence to move towards the correct religion, or more broadly, towards the correct idea about the world. They're not trying to figure out what's true. They're trying to justify what they already think is true. But I'll agree to a more general statement that both religion and science are in some way concerned with what's true and what's real. How about that?
So there really can't be any disagreement between the two. Because if you're both looking for the truth, you got to come to the same conclusion. Because there's only one truth.
I don't know if I'm being overly pedantic with how I'm interpreting what you're saying. Because, I mean, I think I get what you're saying. It's just really, really sloppy. Because I think what you're saying is if both religion and science are looking for the truth, and they're both doing it well in a way that actually leads you eventually to discover the truth, then ultimately they'll both settle on the same truth. Because they've both effectively proceeded towards that truth, albeit by different means. Right? I think that's what you're saying. But the problem is there are a lot of disagreements between religion and science. There are a lot of differences between religions as well. Between all these different things, there's so much disagreement, and there has been for thousands of years. There doesn't seem to be any sort of convergence on one single truth. Point being, if everybody's doing it right, there should be convergence, but there's not, so it seems like somebody's doing something wrong.
But there's a different manner, a different attitude. For example, in Torah, what the Torah tells us is the final word.
No, that's the New Testament. Sorry, I mean the Quran. Sorry, I mean the Book of Mormon.
You either believe it or you don't.
Okay, and you don't see any problems with that as a way to discover the truth. Just believing it's the absolute truth, the final word on the truth, because a book says it, or not. This is a totally legitimate way for you to figure out the truth. But when Christians do it, when Muslims do it, when Mormons do it, when Hindus do it, when anyone else does it, nothing. Then why aren't they apprehending the truth? Is there some problem with the way they're blindly believing their thing and not believing yours, or?
What science is trying to do is come to the conclusion through experiment, through research, and through logic.
In other words, what science is trying to do is learn about reality from reality itself, as opposed to from some random book that someone just declared is the final word. Man, how will I ever decide which one of these is more likely to be true?
That can't be the final word, because as soon as you say this is the final word, you're not being logical anymore.
Wow, I did not expect you to say something that I agree with that much.
You're being dogmatic. And that only applies to religion. We don't want to turn science into a religion.
Oh, definitely. Turning something as useful as science into a religion and making it totally useless. What a horrific proposition. I have to say, at this point of the video, I find myself very confused. I mean, apparently there's some problem with being dogmatic, right? The goal of science is to find out what's true, and we don't want to stop being logical and start being dogmatic and turn science into a religion because, what, would that compromise its goals somehow? Would that diminish its usefulness in learning about reality? Because I think it would, and everything that you just said sounded a lot like something I would say. And yes, I'm pleasantly surprised, but I also don't quite know what to make of it.
So the scientist, the good scientist, knows that no matter what argument I have today, tomorrow I'll have a better one.
Not necessarily, but in general, sure, yeah, damn right. Whereas for the religious person, whatever argument they have today, tomorrow it'll be the same bad argument.
Science is always improving and growing. So you can't say, yesterday I discovered something and that's it. That's the final word. That's the fact. No, it's all part of the research.
Okay, sure. But what you can say is, yesterday I discovered something and it fits much better to what we've observed in reality than whatever I believed before. And tomorrow I might discover something more, but that'll be even better. The thing about reality is it's not so easy to figure out everything about it. If you're looking for some final word, if you're looking for some declaration of absolute truth that will never ever change, because you have total and complete understanding of everything, well, I gotta be honest, it sounds like you're a person who's less concerned with the truth than you are with some sort of emotional comfort, I guess. You know, you're not really interested in the process of discovery. You're not really interested in the complicated, slow, gradual move towards a better understanding of things that's likely imperfect, but better, which is probably about as close as a mind can get to absolute truth. No, that thought that you'll never have the absolute, complete knowledge of everything is, what, scary? Just makes you uncomfortable, I guess. It sends a little shiver up your spine, like, ooh, uncertainty, ugh. And so you just have to point to a book and say, that's the final word, I believe that's the final word, that's it, done. If you want to tell me anything about scientific discoveries and learning and stuff, that's fine, I guess. But I already crossed the finish line, okay? I'm done, project finished, I beat humanity, I'm out. Like, I don't know, does that actually make you feel better? Sure as hell wouldn't make me feel better. It seems awfully artificial. Like, I would always have it stuck in the back of my mind that, look, I mean, really, this is just something I read in a book. I still have no guarantee this is true. In fact, I have even less of a guarantee than if I just kind of read the scientific journals of the day and followed along with the progress that was being made by my fellow human beings, because at least that's based on something. If it's in a book, it's just yet another book. For the life of me, I can't figure out how that's good enough for anyone. I can't figure out how that makes you feel less uncertain and better about your understanding of the universe.
If you say this is it, this is the final conclusion, then you've killed science.
It's not so much that you've killed science, it's more that you've abandoned it. But yeah, so of course you're not going to say 100% with no further debate ever, this is how this works, this is what this is, period, end of story forever, and if you disagree, we'll burn you at the stake. No. But the level of uncertainty that we're talking about here varies pretty widely. There's a reason that things in science are pretty much taken as established fact, even if technically they're open to correction, tweaking, or even a total overhaul. And it's because the evidence for some stuff in science is so overwhelming it boggles the mind. Yeah, if you want to get philosophical, you can apply some level of uncertainty to it, but if it's tested billions of times a day and works out exactly the same every single time, like for example all the scientific understanding that underlies my computer or my car. Well, then when you say, yeah, but it's still uncertain, well then in practical terms, you're kind of just nitpicking.
There's no point in going and doing any more research if you're so sure you know the answer.
Well, yeah, and that actually does happen in science. I mean, you can only dedicate so much time to research. There's only so many things you can spend your time researching or get funding for. At some point, you have to say, okay, that seems to be how that works. We're going to move on. We're going to do other experiments based on that understanding. And I suppose at some point in the future, you might have some experiment that casts doubt on what up until that point was considered, roughly speaking, fact. But like at some point, you're going to stop researching actively what happens when you mix chemical A with chemical B. You know, it's just a fact. This is what will happen. What do you mean by a fact, Logicked? 100% philosophical absolute certainty? No, of course I don't mean that, but it's still taken as a fact. You know, you can bring up all the philosophical objections you want, but scientists do deal in facts. The door is just technically open for those things to change, with an exceptionally high bar of evidence that they've been wrong that whole time, of course.
So, science is human beings trying to figure out what the world is all about. The Torah is the creator telling you what the world is all about.
That's fascinating. How do you know that? Like, know it to an absolute certainty. Is it because someone told you that's what it is, and therefore their word is the final word?
Let me give you a good example. You walk into a room, and there's a desk sitting in the middle of the room.
Oh, I wonder where this is going. I can't believe I said religious people's arguments never improve. I mean, okay, sure, there's a 99% chance this is just the watchmaker thing, but he switched out the watch for a desk. So,
Now you're trying to figure out, how did the desk get there? Was it always there?
Yes, this particular desk, in this particular hypothetical scenario, was always there, yes. And that's the final word on the matter. There will be no discussion. Thank you.
Was it built, put together, right there in that room from pieces?
Pieces? What are you talking about? This desk is an eternal, indivisible whole. I find it extremely disrespectful that you would suggest this desk is a human creation.
You have all sorts of theories, possibilities of how the desk got there. And then some guy walks in and says, excuse me, this is
my book that says this desk was created in 7 days by the ghost of Christmas past out of candy canes that he then transubstantiated into wood. And look, it says right here in the footnote, absolute incontrovertible truth. So if you have any objections, well, more fool you, because you're arguing against the final word.
And he says, excuse me, this is my office. I bought the desk at Costco last week, Tuesday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
No, my example's more accurate.
Well, now you know, and you can put all your theories and guesswork away, because here's the guy who did it.
What if he's lying and it's actually from IKEA? Or it's not actually his office and he killed the owner and flushed him down the toilet?
So the Torah is telling you what God did when he created the world.
Well, yeah, shit, a lot of things are telling you that. That's why my example was better. The random dude's book is telling you what the ghost of Christmas past did when he was building the desk.
It's not a theory. It's not research. It's not using human logic. It's giving you the final answer.
Yeah. What happens in school when you try to cheat off another kid during a test and it turns out he's the dumb kid?
Now the question is, can science, which means human beings, can human beings ever figure out what the Torah already tells us?
Probably not, no. Because science, generally speaking, is trying to figure out how reality actually is. So whatever it figures out is not likely to line up with what the Torah says.
Can we logically come to the same conclusion?
Look, I want to be fair here and say it's possible, but on the other hand, I'm going to have to go with no.
Or are we going to go off in different directions?
Look, there's basically two possibilities here, right? We go off in different directions, or more accurately, you stay still and science moves. Or you come up with some new interpretation of what the Torah says that matches science. And for the rest of your religion's existence, you basically play catch-up. So yeah, okay, we might not necessarily go off in different directions, but science is going its own direction. And if you're going along with it, you're just going to be chasing along pathetically behind it.
So now, let's discuss the whole thing.
What were we doing up to this point?
What does science actually say about the origins of the universe? Well, the scientists gave up on the origins. They don't talk about the origins of the universe anymore because they just can't get there.
You know, you would think just saying that it would ring obviously false, which it is. Of course, there are scientists working on the origin of the universe. I know what you're trying to get at, right? For one thing, the Big Bang Theory only works down to a very tiny fraction of a second after the beginning of the Big Bang. And also, if space-time itself is something of the universe, something that originated post-Big Bang, then does it actually make sense to talk of anything happening in the chronological sense that we're used to before the Big Bang? Like, I understand what you're referring to, but how does that imply that nobody's trying to figure out the origin of the universe? That's just obviously false. I mean, where do you think all this talk of quantum vacuum states and fluctuations and brains colliding with each other and all this kind of stuff comes from? Just because it's an incredibly difficult problem, and a lot of the way that people talk about this stuff may or may not amount to nonsense, and it's possible that it may ultimately be unsolvable, or at least the solution may not be verifiable, does not mean that there are not people willing to take on the challenge. They don't cease to exist just because people like you don't bother keeping up with their work.
So instead, we're talking about the age of the universe. We don't know how it started, but we think we know when it started.
Those are separate questions. Like I say, people do work on the question of how it started, or even if it started, or if our universe is in fact all the it there is. There's people on all of that.
The theory is great. Maybe there was a Big Bang. Maybe there were some subatomic particles or some strange stuff that exploded into a world. Maybe. The theory still needs completing. There are still some holes in the theory. And at best, if there were no holes in the theory, it would be a perfect possibility.
Well, no, that's underselling it a little bit. If there were no holes in the theory, that would mean it explained everything perfectly, right? Everything that it was intended to explain, at least. Unless you're only talking about holes in the theory that we notice, but you said no holes at all, which would be a theory that explains everything with nothing left to discredit it. If you were presented with a theory like that and you just brushed it off by saying, well, it's a possibility, I guess, I think that'd show an almost comical amount of bias.
But nobody would say, this is for sure how it happened.
No, but to be honest, if it was that good, if not only could we not find anything that disproves it, but there was nothing that disproves it, because it fits so perfectly to everything, yeah, I mean, hopefully people wouldn't be saying, with absolute certainty, this is the answer. I mean, hell, I don't believe with absolute certainty that my arms exist. Absolute certainty is an absurdity. There's always room for some other explanation. You can always come up with something else, right? It's all just a dream induced by technology, and I'm sitting in a chair in some mall arcade somewhere, playing the demo version of the Human Life game. I don't know. Seems pretty far-fetched, but, I mean, you gotta leave the door open to it, right? If only just the tiniest crack. But let's not take that openness to a stupid level. Like, I'm pretty well convinced that my arms are real. If you asked me to bet my life on it, I'd bet my life on it. And if you had a theory of the universe that somehow you could verify fits so well that you could say for a fact that the theory itself had no holes, that it explained everything observable and unobservable perfectly, then yeah, you wouldn't say to an absolute certainty this is the thing. But what you would say is that's pretty damn compelling. I'm pretty much going to have to accept that that's the way it happened, unless and until something better comes along, and the chances of that, well, they're not very good. Sure, stay open to something better coming along, but let's be reasonable here.
Because you can't. You can't know for sure. You can only say it could have happened this way.
No, that makes it sound like some random guess. You could also say that based on all observed evidence fitting with this theory, it's strongly indicated that it did happen this way, or that it's much more likely it happened this way than that other way that requires a whole bunch of other variables and crazy things that we've never observed and just generally way more complexity. I mean, you don't operate like this in your day-to-day life, I know that. I mean, listen, if you're sitting upstairs and you hear your front door get smashed in and you run downstairs and you find some guy rummaging through your stuff, you're not just gonna say, well, could have just been the wind, I really don't know. Maybe ghosts are real and it was just a poltergeist. Maybe the lock just spontaneously exploded. These are all equally likely, I have no idea. And you know, it could be that he's trying to steal my stuff. It could also be that he's trying to help me out by performing an organizational service for me, cataloging my belongings, inserting them into a database, which he'll provide me through email at a later date. So I don't know that he's up to no good. I'm not going to call the police or anything. I'm just going to go upstairs and leave him alone. Right? This is absolute nonsense behavior. The kind of stuff you're saying right now, you would never accept about anything else. You would only accept this when you're trying to justify your religion. And that's what I mean about religious people not in good faith trying to actually figure things out, but just justify what they already believe. You pretend like you'll never draw a conclusion from the evidence in front of you pointing a specific direction. It would be so unreasonable, so irrational to declare any explanation more likely than any other, or to call any explanation the best one, the most likely one. To say that to not accept that explanation based on the evidence provided is less justified than to accept it. I'm sorry, but at a certain point, not accepting a scientific explanation starts to make you look like a bit of an idiot. Like, yeah, maybe there is another explanation for your door being kicked in that doesn't involve the guy who's there rummaging through your stuff. That's absolutely possible, of course. But does that honestly mean that you're unwilling to say that's the most likely cause, that you find that compelling? That you believe that's probably what happened, is that guy kicked in your door? Seriously? Like, are you kidding me? Give me a break, man. But here you are sitting there trying to convince me that's how you think, and that's how other people should think. That's how scientists should think. Just because it's convenient for you if they think that way, because you think then maybe you'll shake their confidence a little bit if they say things that don't align with your religion. Because, hey, you can't make any confident statements about anything based on how well your explanation lines up to the observable evidence, because that's irrational.
And even if it could have happened this way, maybe it didn't. Maybe God came and created it and didn't wait for it to happen.
Yeah, maybe all kinds of stuff. It's funny, you seem to be criticizing science for dealing in maybes, and yet here you are justifying your God did it position by saying, well, hey, maybe God did it. Even if you have a perfect theory that explains every single thing perfectly, well, yeah, but still, maybe God. Maybe Zeus throws down lightning bolts. Maybe Neptune causes the tides. You don't know. So, checkmate, atheist. Like, if this is your best defense against scientific advancement shooting down elements of your religion, you really must think you're on your last legs here. I mean, this comes off as pathetically desperate.
So, there really is no conflict between a good theory and a fact.
What? When was that mentioned? This wasn't about whether there's conflict between theories and facts. I mean, theories explain facts. Of course there's no conflict between a theory and a fact. They're inextricably linked. You said at the start this was about whether there's conflict between religion and science. Are you trying to say, like, science is made of theories and religion is made of facts? No. Religion has assertions in a book, in this case, like you say, the Torah, and science has facts being what you observe, and theories being explanations of what you observe. And there does tend to be conflict between the facts and theories of science and the assertions of religion, as I believe you're well aware, frankly, just based on the fact that you decided to make this video. And at this point, there's a new section of the video called Creation, so this seems like a good place to stop. I might come back for a part 2, haven't quite decided yet. I kinda like this one, so we'll see. Thanks everyone for stopping by. Before you go, please do me a favor and give the video a like, click subscribe. Big thanks to all of my supporters on every platform, and I'll see you next time.